All right, let me start one more time. Everybody out there, welcome to America Heroes Group, the live stream digital media show. My name is Sadeek Colquitt. I am the founder and executive director of the Plant-Based Afrikan Center for Nutrition. And want to have a discussion with you this evening, or do our best to kind of just have a chat and slowly walk through a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about high blood pressure, heart disease, and if we get to it, maybe um, talk about Alzheimer's and dementia, all which have the same root, right? So high blood pressure, heart disease, Alzheimer's, and dementia all have the same root, and they are all diet related. So, yeah, just want to get started this evening. And again, Sadeek Colquitt, the Plant-Based Afrikan Center for Nutrition. You can reach out for us at the PBA centerfornutrition.org or plant-based African with a K as it is on the screen at gmail.com. Plant-based African with a K at gmail.com or the PBA Center for Nutrition.org. So it's actually a pleasure to come to you and talk to you once a month and really take some time to understand what's going on with health and disease in America. Health in America is one of the most misunderstood topics across the nation. It is full of misinformation, a lot of guesses, and it's also a lot of research that actually doesn't line up, doesn't really make sense. And so it leaves the people or the average person in the public really with nowhere to go, trusting the system. And at the end of the day, around three quarters of the American public are actually ill, and so we can look at the data and see that there really isn't a healthy situation in the country. And most of it, 90% of it, is due to what we consume. And so that's pretty alarming. And we may know that in a general fashion, right? That Americans eat unhealthy. They talk about fast food and processed foods. And so, but rarely do we get square information on the ratio of foods that we're eating. We get messages that aren't necessarily from the nutrition side, but we get messages that are from the advertising, marketing, and business side. For instance, milk does the body good. Milk does the body good is a slogan created by the dairy industry to actually sell milk, but very rarely do we have information on what milk or dairy milk or cow's milk, what it actually does to the body. And so other slogans, like, how much, where do I get my protein, how much protein do I need, and then the list just goes on and on and on. And all of these ideas, all of these constructs are really given to the public to drive product sales as opposed to health. And so we can see that we consume what we're being told to consume, and we're also suffering for it in the long run. And we have also misleading information. And today we face in America a population that, although by years we may be living longer, quality of life is actually headed downward and trending downward in the other direction. So by the time you are approaching the last 10 or 15 years of your life as a public, we are more sick and more dependent upon others than we ever have been before. And a lot of it is due to what we find on the ends of our fork. So, how do we make sense of what those things are? How do we parse the information that we are receiving? And so that's a bit of what I'd like to do today. And as we continue the conversation, because there's so much information coming at you on TV, social media, all types of broadcast, and there's so many voices in our head. And so we want to pick through that. And I've spent um, the last 25 years in disease mitigation, helping people, including myself. At 29, diagnosed with high cholesterol and high blood pressure, was told that I was going to need to be on meds for the rest of my life. And today, at 54, 25 years later, I've never been on any type of cholesterol lowering drug. I don't have any medications. As a matter of fact, I am disease free, which puts me at less than 2% of the population my age, demographic, and background as a African American male born and raised on the south side of Chicago. So, how do we just step by step walk through this information and then get a clear understanding that things like heart disease, which eventually leads to heart attacks, can lead to stroke, and can lead to just a number of issues in the body. What is the beginning of that? And so, I want to have a conversation about cholesterol. And I think I started maybe a few months ago. We started with this and how cholesterol and other fats, saturated fats, trans fats that we find in packaged or refined in highly processed products, right? These different fats, how they eventually build up and begin to coat our arteries, right? And because the body doesn't know what to do with it, and when our system can no longer begin to eliminate it, it just builds up in the body, and it causes all kinds of disturbance in terms of what our normal or optimal cell function should be. So let's start with cholesterol. And when I speak to audiences, and I had several conversations with clients this week about their cholesterol levels. Some approaching 200, some in the 220s, some in the 230s. And although the body needs cholesterol, right, the body cannot handle um, extra cholesterol, and it begins to build in the system because we're not actually getting rid of it. And so there are deposits, and it begins to deposit in the bloodstream, and then it will begin to build up on the walls of your arteries. And then we get into a situation where it builds into plaque, and then those plaques will form larger plaques, and they will begin almost like small hills inside of your arteries. And if those plaques begin to break away, they can flow upstream or in the way the blood is moving, and then get lodged in another section that is smaller, and then that causes a blockage and can lead to a heart attack, and then several other misfunctionings of the body. But cholesterol, uh, being one of the things that helps to coagulate those fats, meaning put them together to begin these plaque structures in the body. One of the things that I want to be clear about, and I explain to my clients when I'm speaking to audiences, want you to understand that your body makes all of the cholesterol that you will need. Okay, I'm going to say it one more time. Your body, your liver, because you have to have cholesterol, right? Cholesterol works in several functions in terms of the body, and it's one of the building blocks. And so you have to have it in order to have a healthy, optimally functioning biosystem. But your liver makes the cholesterol that you need, right? So you are perfectly calibrated with all of the cholesterol that you need, right? Your liver is working it from birth, no matter how old you are. You're already at a perfectly calibrated level of cholesterol. So how then do you go from the elevate to the already perfectly calibrated, right, level of cholesterol that you need for your body functioning? How does it begin to rise, to elevate until where ultimately your body can't get rid of it, doesn't know what to do with it, and it begins to build up, leading to heart disease, and then a lot of the aforementioned conditions that we talked about. And so that process begins when we consume items, that we call food, when we consume items, right, that are animal based, because their bodies make cholesterol just like your body. So a cow's body has to make cholesterol because the cow needs it, just like your body. Chicken's body makes cholesterol, right? And so these living animals, these living organisms, they make cholesterol. And then you consume the excess cholesterol, which then goes on top of the level of cholesterol you already have because your liver is making the amount of cholesterol that your body needs. And so now your levels begin to rise over time because the amount that your body can't get rid of, it begins to build up inside. And so this is what I call biology math, right? And so saving you some time and heartache. There are millions of Americans who are on cholesterol lowering drugs. And those drugs do help you to bring down your cholesterol, but they're also, if you understand why you have it, those drugs can become unnecessary. And you can actually take control of the cholesterol levels in your body by understanding that your body makes cholesterol. And the only way to get extra or excess cholesterol is to eat another animal whose body also makes cholesterol. And so I'm hoping this is making sense because this has helped. Um, this has helped lots of people understand what they're facing when they go into the doctor's office. Because a lot of times when we go in and we hear things like, you have excess cholesterol, we never hear the reasons why. We don't understand what's happening behind the curtain, so to speak. We don't understand what the doctor is really saying to us, right? And so the question becomes, well, how did it get this way? And it's not just because the food was fried. It's not just because you're consuming fast food. You can consume very lean cuts of chicken breasts, and you can grill your salmon outside, and you can have grass-fed beef, but you will continue to elevate your cholesterol levels because those animals' bodies contain cholesterol. And so this is not information merely to, um, you know, um, stigmatize what you are eating. This information is merely given to you, or I'm giving it to you, so that you can have a modicum of control in terms of how the outcome, what the outcome is when you go into the doctor's office. And so you can understand. I was working with a gentleman this past fall. We worked together for 90 days. His cholesterol was over 240. Yeah, his cholesterol was up to 240, and normal range should be around 160, 150. And we worked his numbers all the way under 150. And it was by doing a simple reduction of the animal foods that he was consuming. So let me give you an idea. If you're having eggs and cheese for breakfast, cholesterol, cholesterol. Chicken sandwich for lunch, cholesterol, cholesterol. A steak for dinner or ground beef for dinner, cholesterol, 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 cholesterol. And you take that as many days a week as that pattern's repeated. You take that week over months, and then you take those months over years, and then you extrapolate that out to however many years you have been alive. And then you begin to see that these numbers build again because the body does not know what to do with the excess cholesterol. And so that becomes an issue. And then that cholesterol, the saturated fats that are also found in animal-centered products, and then the trans fats and the fats that have been mutated, so to speak, as stabilizers and are used in just products that we pick up off the shelf in the processed aisles of the grocery store, which is most of the grocery store. They are canned, packaged, bagged items that have been processed, and they contain these oils. They will contain cholesterol. They will contain milk products. And so these things over time begin to build in our systems, and we'll find ourselves, especially as African American men and women, we'll find ourselves in our late 30s, early 40s, moving into our 50s, and our bodies just cannot handle that type of debt load over time, and it becomes a problem. And so we start working with the doctor calling us in and saying, hey, you've got prediabetes, or hey, you've got high cholesterol, or hey, you've got X, you've got Y, you've got Z. And then by the time we are, I have a few clients now, late 60s, early 70s, we start approaching and saying, hey, our thoughts are foggy, memory is becoming a challenge and an issue. And so all of that is related to the oils, the fats, and the cholesterol that we consume over time. Okay. And so I want to give a little time to, so heart disease, high cholesterol can be controlled by the ratio of plant to animal products that we eat. So, for instance, the things that grandma made or mom made, that in terms of vegetables, like those collard greens, those mustard greens, those turnip greens, you know how much cholesterol? Zero, zero. Those pole beans, those string beans, those black eyed peas, you know how much cholesterol? Zero, zero. The squash, we could go on down the list. The kale greens, we could go into the fruits, bananas, apples, pears, mangoes. Cholesterol, zero. And so we talk a lot about adding to the diet, but we never talk about subtracting, right? And it's a process of both. So as you add and you have more fruit and vegetables in your diet, you also have to dial back on, if you want to effectively lower your cholesterol and therefore lower your chances of heart disease, heart attack, and stroke. You have to reduce the amount of items you're eating that actually contain the cholesterol. That would be the chicken, the beef, the pork, the fish, and definitely eggs and dairy. They are some of the highest fat and cholesterol content uh, foods you will ever eat. And so the process is, how do I manage this? Everybody is unique and has a unique code. But in general, the more you can reduce the animal centered foods you are eating, and the more you can increase the plant centered, the plant based foods that you're eating, you will see your health go in an upward trajectory as opposed to continuing to move on a downward trajectory. Our bodies are just not equipped to handle the load that animal centered foods put on us, from our digestive tract, from our gut health, to how we process oxygen. And so, to be really clear, I just want to spend a little time on Alzheimer's and dementia. And so, my first contact with it was in the late 70s. I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and not very much understanding, like had no idea of what dementia was. But one of my aunts in the South, you could tell because every time we would go back, she would remember less and less and less. And it was challenging to, and having no understanding and being young, to just see someone that you loved, admired, and played with actually have less of an idea of who you are or were over time until eventually they passed away. So it's a very sensitive and personal situation for me. So I say that, and it affects millions of people, millions of people. But the basic understanding also is that a shift in diet can also stem the tide, right? And it can and put you in a hold and actually begin to mitigate and help with the idea of memory retention, with how the brain works. And so I want to share a little basic understanding of the fact that the brain, although it's not the largest organ that you have, but the brain, uh, based on its size, uses the most oxygen out of all of the organs in your body. Your brain will use 20% or more of all of the oxygen that you breathe in. So you have to understand that for a moment, or just sit with that. All of the oxygen you breathe in, your brain right up here will use 20% or more of that oxygen. And then what carries that oxygen to the brain, right? The blood, right? And so now, as we've talked about this buildup. We've talked about this buildup of cholesterol, right? We've talked about these fats. We've talked about these waxy substances, right? We've talked about plaque. And so now researchers are starting to look at the plaques that build, right? The amyloid plaques, these things that disrupt blood flow to the brain. So imagine, and that, these arteries, right, the capillaries up here, they're much smaller than the ones that are in larger parts of your body. So imagine over time filling these spaces with these extra fats, these trans fats, these saturated fats, with the cholesterol, all through diet. And the body can't handle them. So the deposits happen in your arteries, right? These plaques begin to build. And as they build, it obstructs the blood flow. But for the brain, as you are obstructing the blood flow, you are also obstructing the oxygen flow. And the brain simply cannot function without oxygen. And so parts or centers of the brain begin to shut down, and you wake up and your thoughts are foggy. You can't remember where you placed your briefcase. And so these things are not a function of age. I want to say that again. These things are not a function of age. It is a function of diet over time, a function of diet over time, years and years and years. When you read and look into the data shows that the average American, right, that is a part of partaking in the standard American diet, no matter what cultural version of that you have, basically an animal centered diet. The average American has the start, or what they call the floor or the beginnings of heart disease, right? Coronary artery disease between the ages of 16 and 18. So I want to say that again: the beginnings of heart disease, coronary artery disease at the ages of 15, I'm sorry, 16 to 18 years old. So everybody, right? 325, 335 million people in the United States, maybe as high as 340 million people today, um, all have 99% this condition where heart disease is beginning as a teenager. And so we go in our 20s, we go in our 30s, our 40s again, and we continue up this curve because what we are consuming and that consumption is wreaking havoc in the body. And these conditions can be controlled, just like they start at the end of the fork, they can be controlled by what we do at the end of the fork. And so there's so many things that play a role in
To
the
AHG
nitrates
Connects,
that are
where
necessary
voices,
in the
information,
so
and
just want you
resources
to know,
are empowered
time for me to get out of
intentionally.
here. But if you have questions, again, reach out to us at the PBA Center for Nutrition or Plant-Based African with a K at gmail.com. We'd love to continue the dialogue. We want to thank you for joining us this evening, and we want to wish everybody well. And again, thank you and have a great night.